this other book that I'm getting these out of does the same thing your book does. It moves from paragraph to essay. So we're kind of leaving the paragraphs behind. But this one, the one that this homework started out with, is a really good example of what I'm talking about when I say that the way I teach essays is to kind of explode the paragraph into an essay, okay? So this was a longish paragraph that they gave you, and they gave you the topic sentence here. Great athletes do not reach the top by talent alone, but by pushing themselves to the limit and beyond, okay? So for what we have been doing, this would have made a good paragraph, right? And they have, again, kind of a longish paragraph compared to what we've been doing. But they have this here. All right. So, like I said, this is a really easy one to break out into an essay. If I were going to ask you to do that, which wasn't what you were asked to do, but that's what we're doing now. Where would the first body paragraph start? If this were an example essay, where would the first body paragraph start? Yes, good. So the first body paragraph would start right here. This is a transition. This is a transition showing you that the person is moving from their argument, right? Great athletes do not reach the top by talent alone, but by pushing themselves to the limit and beyond. This means exactly the same thing as for example. For instance is just another word for example. For instance, to illustrate, one example is, so this is going to be the person's first example. So again, we're looking at something that's going to look like this. For us, for right now, this board doesn't like the erase all the way. We're looking at a short essay. It doesn't have to be long. In fact, for the purposes of this first essay, I would accept your thesis statement. So what's going to happen here is this becomes the thesis statement for the whole essay, okay? Then the first paragraph here is going to be about LeBron James. Where's the second body paragraph going to start? Good. Yeah, and this is the next. So we have this. So people who have taken reading classes are seeing these are the transitions that are moving from one to the other. So this is going to be Annika Sorenstam. And where does the third body paragraph start? Okay. Yeah. So this is the last one. This is a little bit dated because we know now that Lance Armstrong has kind of lost his place in the sports world. But so this is a little bit old. Okay. So now here's the question. Does this paragraph, the way it's written here, does this paragraph have a concluding sentence?
Yes.
Now wait a minute. Does this paragraph have a sentence that we could turn into the conclusion? No. The last sentence in this paragraph is still talking about Lance Armstrong. So like we said, in a paragraph, does everyone see that? What we have done up to now, the two papers you did, you have a topic sentence, and then the details, which this one has. And then remember the way I teach it. Now, some other people may have had teachers that teach it slightly different. Some teachers require that you have a concluding sentence, but I don't. remember on the paragraph we said a concluding sentence is optional. So this person who wrote this paragraph about these three athletes did not choose to put a concluding sentence. They felt that their point was clear. Great athletes do not reach the top by talent alone, but by pushing themselves to the limit and beyond. Here are three examples. And they felt their point was clear enough without coming back around and saying, so you can see with these three examples that I'm right. Okay, which is basically what a concluding sentence would have done. Does that, now you're frowning, does that make sense?
So why does it say conclusion on the bottom?
Okay, good question. So this is kind of a misnomer, and I'm glad you caught that. This is actually just this is weird. I mean, there's one weird thing, although I still think that these questions are better than the one in the other book. So that's why I did this. But yes, good, very good. You caught that. This actually is not a perfect example. Because think about it. If you put that sentence down here, it doesn't talk about these other things. Yeah. So this is kind of weird. This is the concluding sentence to this example. Okay. Yeah. Then, in order to use this paragraph, you would have to add something, or if you were exploding information. Yeah. Good catch. I know. This is why teachers end up writing their own textbooks, because no matter how I look around for all these good things, and then there's always something. Why do they do that? That's not right. But who has time to write textbooks? I don't know if there's time to write textbooks. Okay, but it's part of the reason that it's kind of piecemeal, because the other one, your book doesn't run it the way I do it all. So if we put this up here, in fact, I would put, and I think what they're getting at here is that this, as a supporting detail, this it isn't specific. These things are very specific. These are like a narrative, right? He did this, he did this, he did this. So this sentence is different from these because it's just a general statement. But what I would have done to make this into a real concluding sentence, I would have done that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay? So this is basically what you're going to be doing with your example essay. Now, the conclusion is a little bit odd here, although it's easily fixable into a real conclusion for the whole essay. There's another thing that's different here from what I'm going to have you do. So if we did this, if we change this to these three people, then it becomes a perfect concluding sentence. Now, believe it or not, as easy as this paragraph is to understand, it's very easy to follow because the person, you can see what they're doing. Here's one example, here's the second example, here's the third example. And then in the bottom, we can say these three people prove my point, is basically what you're saying, without saying just that. There's another thing I'm going to ask you to do in your essays, and that goes along with what the homework that I just handed back to you, that business of picking out the three-part essay map. It sounds, when you first hear this, you're going to think, but Ms. Penny, it sounds like I'm repeating myself, okay? But the thesis statement is that important when we move to a thesis statement here. What I'm going to ask you to do, let's see if I can find something's on here, is, so just like we were doing here, I'm going to ask you to actually list the three things in your first sentence. So for this, just like we did in that homework, okay? So for this, if we were going to use this, like we're doing here, what you're going to have to say up here is, great athletes do not reach the top by talent alone, but by pushing themselves to the limit and beyond LeBron James, Annika Sorenstam, and Lance Armstrong. But you have to pick somebody else if you're going to do this. Some people have actually chosen to use this as their topic. You know, don't copy what they have either. But the topic of, you know, 3 athletes that have proven that they push themselves. Okay? So that's the other difference. We're going to actually add that 3-part thesis statement. Okay? So this is your thesis statement. Okay, now especially when you're looking at it in a paragraph, I know it sounds like, I feel like I'm repeating myself, because I'm saying their names and then I'm saying the names again. Believe me, when you get into essays, and we're going to write a short one first, but when you get into longer essays, it's really important for your reader to have these signposts. You're kind of saying, here's what I'm going to talk about. Here's what I'm talking about, and here's what I just said. It's that important to give your reader those reminders along the way that here's where we are in our essay. Okay? Does that make sense? So yeah, this is pretty straightforward. 3 examples. Who are they? James Thornton and Armstrong. And this outline, and these people are kind of covering themselves here by saying, probably made an outline that looks like this, but then they went back in and made this change, right? Because otherwise, yeah, that would come to discussion. Okay? So you have what is now going to become the thesis statement for an essay, and then you're going to have a concluding paragraph that ties the whole thing. Does that make sense? Okay, where's your next question? Okay, here are some transitions. Later on, as you're seeing both of these books, later on I'm going to give you a handout with all of the transition expressions on it. Because as you can see, you probably already figured out, and I think the English Center will do too, there are transitional expressions for all the different writing modes. So in the narration one, you're going like in the diner. First we went here, then we did this, then we went in the door, then we sat down at the counter. So you have a passage of time. But you have those marks that say first, next, then. Okay. In the description one, kind of the same thing. We talked a little bit about, I think we did in this class, about organizing the description essay by saying, remember that Hot Fudge Sundae? She went from the top to the bottom. She said on the top is a cherry or whatever, then there's whipped cream. So same kind of thing, you're kind of moving. If you're describing the room, you do the walls, then the ceiling, then the furniture, whatever your order is. Okay? So we had spatial order. Remember that? Spatial order in the description. Chronological order, those are pretty. And remember, this word is the same, that's a C there, actually, spatial. Chronological in the narrative. And in this essay, you're going to have 3 examples. What order do you think this writer did? Did this writer think in terms of these types of order when they wrote this example paragraph? Are these in any particular order? Not really, except that she does, he or she, I don't know whether it's for some reason I think this is a she. But they did say, which is, let's see, the beginning here, perhaps no player in any sport can match the work ethic of Lance Armstrong. So the time this was written, this person does seem to think that Lance Armstrong is the best example of this. Okay? So in a sense, she she did it in what's called, there's another order. She did it in what's called, so for example, I'm right up here. You're kind of thinking in terms of what's called can anyone guess what that means? Emphatic order. We know what spatial order is, that's space. We know what chronological order is, that's time, first, then next. Do you know a word root that you can guess what that means? And I'm saying that she saved what she's thinking is
Like
the most-
examples?
Yeah, example. Well, we're doing an example essay, and we're gonna put it in this kind of order. What about this? Right? She's putting them in the order in which she wants to emphasize it. So she's saving the biggest boom for last. Now you can do it the other way. You can have your emphasis at the beginning, do your most important point first, and then two lesser points. But it doesn't really, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time thinking about it. This essay probably would have been just as good if she had just had it in alphabetical order. It doesn't really matter. But you might think about that. When you come up with your 3 examples to prove your argument, what order are you going to put them in? To do that. Does that make sense? Okay, so this was pretty straightforward. Now the next one, same kind of thing. These are still paragraphs, but these underlined is practice 1. It says, note in the margin how many examples are provided to illustrate each general statement. So the general statement saying that many athletes rely on hard work rather than just talent have 3 examples. The thing about these paragraphs is that we're looking at right now, these, partly because they're paragraphs, don't have 3-part essay maps. And what you need to be thinking of while you're doing this homework is how would I explode this paragraph? That's what I call it. Explode this paragraph. Okay, so this is becoming exploded out into this. These are being exploded out into your 3-paragraph body. And this is being exploded out into this, right? Everybody follow that? My very lovely drawing up here. Okay, so this is still a topic sentence. If you were to turn it into a 3-part thesis statement, what are the things that this person uses to prove this point? Random acts of kindness are those sweet or grand, lovely things we do for no reason except that momentarily the best of our humanity has sprung into full bloom. 3 examples of this are what? Yeah, giving an old woman a bouquet of red carnations, giving your lunch to the guitar-playing beggar, and putting coins in someone's pocket. Okay? It's interesting how this kind of automatically defaults to 3. There's nothing magic, like I said. You can do 4, you can do 7, but that's going to be a bigger paper. That's going to make your paper longer. Right now, we just are looking at the 5-paragraph essay. Okay? So the answer here was easy. The point is whether you can see where the writer's going. So if they exploded this out into an essay, they'd have this same thing, list the 3 briefly, and then they would expand these narratives. Now here's the other thing that we want to look at when we look at our list of writing modes. You guys are writing an example essay. in which you're choosing 3 examples to prove something. But within those examples, especially this one, you're writing a narrative. You're going back and using that other writing note, right? You're gonna write a narrative of when you gave this old lady the red roses, a narrative of when and why you gave this person your money, and a narrative of when, why, and how you put coins in somebody else's beaker. And that's what's gonna expand this. Does that make sense? I'm hoping you guys are thinking in terms of your worksheet. What am I gonna use to expand my paper? Okay, and then this one, there are many quirky variations to lightning. How many? 4? Yeah, this one has 4. A bolt from the blue is a long horizontal flash, St. Elmo's fire, pearl lightning. So if you were gonna write this essay, how many paragraphs would this essay have if I asked you to take this and expand it into an essay? This would have 6, because now you would have 4 body paragraphs. Again, there's nothing magic about 3. I'm just starting you out on 3 because, like I say, we were talking about the length of a paper the other day, the need to focus. If I assign you a paragraph, you need to focus tiny. If I assign you a 300 to 500 word essay, which is what the one you're doing now is, then you bite off a little bit more. If I assign you a 5-page paper, then it's bigger. A 10-page paper, a 30-page paper, see what I'm saying? Then you're expanding a little. You're still not doing the whole topic, but you're expanding a little. So we're still way down here on the 300 to 500 word essay. Okay? Now, this was one of the things I did with this is, if you notice on your worksheet, I actually said that you could pick one of the topics from homework 5A to write about if you wanted to. So if you wanted to choose something like this, if you wanted to write about a museum that you know about and give me an argument about that museum, you could do that, okay? But, so we're gonna go over this real briefly. Let's go ahead and take a break first and come back at, let's come back at 11:18.